The clink of a champagne flute against crystal, a whispered secret in a room where money is the quietest thing. For billionaire Oliver Prescott, tonight was an escape. In the velvet-draped corner of New York's most exclusive restaurant, Ethelred's, he was with the one woman who made him feel alive, his mistress Kira. He was about to give her a gift that would change her life, but he had no idea that his 8 months pregnant wife, Sophia, was walking through the very same doors not for a meal, but for a reckoning. What happens when a perfect life is built on a perfect lie, and the whole structure comes crashing down over a plate of seared scallops? Stay tuned, because this isn't just a dinner, it's a demolition. The air in Ethelred's was thick with the scent of old money and new ambition. It smelled of truffle oil, vintage leather, and the faint floral perfume of women who never had to look at a price tag. In the most secluded booth, nestled in an alcove curtained by deep crimson velvet, sat Oliver Prescott. At 42, he possessed the easy confidence of a man who had never been denied anything. His suit was a bespoke creation by a tailor in Savile Row, whose name was only whispered, and his watch, a Patek Philippe, was a subtle nod to a fortune so vast it was almost abstract. Opposite him, Kira Petrova was a splash of vibrant color in the muted room. She was an art gallery curator, all sharp angles and sharper wit, with eyes the color of storm clouds that saw the world not for what it was, but for what it could be. To Oliver, she was not just a woman, she was a rebellion against the predictable, blue-blooded world he was born into, and against the perfectly manicured, perfectly managed life he shared with his wife, Sophia. "You're staring," Kira said, a playful smile touching her lips. She swirled the burgundy in her glass, the deep red liquid catching the low light. "I'm admiring," Oliver corrected, his voice a low purr. He reached across the table, his fingers tracing the back of her hand. Her skin was electric. With Sophia, touch had become procedural, a checklist of married life. With Kira, it was a live wire. "I was just thinking that this painting," he gestured vaguely to the abstract canvas on the wall behind her, "is criminally undervalued if it has to compete with you for attention." Kira laughed, a sound like wind chimes that made the stuffy restaurant feel, for a moment, like a breezy open space. "Flattery, Mr. Prescott. Is that how you close all your billion-dollar deals?" "Only the ones that matter," he said, his gaze intense. This was their ritual. Twice a month they met here. It was a foolish risk. Ethelred's was the unofficial boardroom for half of Wall Street and the preferred confessional for their wives. But Oliver thrived on the risk. It was part of the allure. He had built the Prescott global empire on calculated gambles, on buying when others sold, on seeing the fault lines in a market before anyone else. His affair with Kira felt like the same kind of thrilling, high-stakes venture. He had met her 6 months ago at a gallery opening his wife had dragged him to. Sophia had been discussing the artist's use of negative space with a gaggle of society matrons, her hand resting proprietorially on her just beginning to swell belly. Oliver, bored and feeling like a prop, had wandered off and found himself standing before a chaotic, beautiful painting of a city skyline shattering into a million pieces. "It's about the beauty of collapse," a voice next to him had said. It was Kira. She was the curator. The idea that some things have to be completely destroyed before you can build something true. He felt that sentiment in his bones. He was living in a cathedral of a life, grand and impressive, but he was rattling around in it, lonely and cold. Sophia was a perfect partner, a brilliant hostess, a woman bred to be the wife of a Prescott. She was a CEO in her own right before they married, merging her family's smaller tech firm with his conglomerate in a move celebrated on the cover of Forbes. She was his equal in intellect and ambition, and now she was carrying his son, the heir to the Prescott legacy. It was everything he was supposed to want. So why did it feel like a gilded cage? Sophia managed their life like a portfolio, optimizing every social engagement, every vacation, every public appearance for maximum return. Even their pregnancy felt scheduled, a strategic next step in the dynasty's 10-year plan. She was beautiful. She was smart. But the passion had been replaced by partnership. He yearned for the chaos of Kira's painting, for the beauty of collapse. "I have something for you," Oliver said, snapping back to the present. He slid a thin, elegant box across the table. It wasn't a jewelry box from a famous brand. It was plain, black, and heavy. Kira's eyes widened slightly. She was careful about gifts. She'd refused a car, an apartment. She had her own career, her own pride. It was one of the things he admired about her. She wasn't a kept woman. She was his co-conspirator. She opened the box. Inside, nestled on black silk, was not a necklace or a bracelet, but a single ornate antique key. It was silver, with a complex filigreed head. "What's this?" she asked, her voice a hush. "It's the key to a studio apartment. 14th Street, overlooking the park. It's not in my name. It's not in your name. It's held by a shell corporation that doesn't exist on paper. It's a ghost," he explained. "It's ours. A place where we don't have to hide. No more restaurants, no more secret hotel suites." Her breath hitched. This was different. This wasn't a gift. It was an invitation into a shared life, albeit a shadow one. It was a tangible piece of a future he was offering her. Her eyes, usually so guarded, welled with a sudden, overwhelming emotion. She looked from the key to his face, a silent question hanging in the air. "What does this mean?" Oliver leaned forward, capturing her gaze. "It means I'm serious, Kira. This thing between us, it's not just an escape anymore." He was lying, of course, or at least, he was lying to himself. It was an escape, but it was a lie he desperately wanted to believe. He was so lost in her stormy eyes and the promise of this new secret world he was building that he didn't notice the subtle shift in the restaurant's atmosphere. He didn't hear the way the low murmur of conversation faltered for a half second, like a skip on a record. He didn't see the way the maître d', a man named Jean-Pierre who was paid a small fortune for his discretion, suddenly stiffened at the entrance, his professional smile freezing on his face. The world was about to collapse, just like in the painting, and Oliver Prescott, the master of the universe, was about to find out how beautiful it really was. The first sign of trouble was Jean-Pierre. The maître d' was a master of a very specific, very New York art form, making the absurdly wealthy feel both completely at home and utterly terrified of being cast out. His movements were usually as fluid and unobtrusive as water, but now as he approached Oliver's table, his steps were clipped, his shoulders rigid. "Mr. Prescott," Jean-Pierre said, his voice a low, urgent murmur. He kept his eyes fixed on a point just above Oliver's head, refusing to acknowledge Kira. "Excuse the interruption." Oliver felt a prickle of annoyance. "Jean-Pierre, I trust the building isn't on fire." "No, sir, but there is a situation." Jean-Pierre leaned in closer, his French accent thickening with anxiety. "Your wife, Mrs. Prescott, has just arrived." The words hung in the air, colder and sharper than the ice in Oliver's water glass. For a moment, his mind went blank. It was a system error, a critical failure in the carefully compartmentalized code he used to run his life. Sophia? Here? It was impossible. She had a prenatal yoga class on Tuesdays, followed by a conference call with the architects designing the nursery. Her schedule was a fortress, every hour accounted for. She never deviated. He could feel Kira stiffen beside him. Her hand, which had been resting on his, slowly withdrew. The warmth was gone. "There must be a mistake," Oliver said, his voice tight. He was already scanning the entrance, his heart beginning a low, heavy drumbeat against his ribs. "I assure you, sir, there is no mistake," Jean-Pierre whispered, his face pale. "She is at the hostess stand." And then Oliver saw her. Sophia Prescott was not a woman who simply entered a room. She took possession of it. Even now, 8 months pregnant, she moved with a grace that defied the physical awkwardness of her condition. She was wearing a simple, impeccably tailored navy blue dress that skimmed her body, showcasing her baby bump not as an encumbrance, but as a statement. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a severe, elegant chignon, and her face, which the society pages often described as aristocratically serene, was a mask of calm. But Oliver, who had known her for a decade, could see the chilling stillness in her blue eyes. It was the calm of a frozen lake, beautiful and treacherous, hiding fathomless depths below. She wasn't looking at him, not yet. She was speaking quietly to the young hostess, who looked as if she were about to faint. Diners at nearby tables were beginning to notice. Conversations lulled. Heads turned. The delicate ecosystem of Ethelred's was being disrupted by the arrival of a predator at the top of the food chain. People didn't know what was happening, but they knew it was something. "Oliver?" Kira's voice was barely a whisper. All the vibrant confidence had drained from her, replaced by a raw, animal fear. She was looking at him, her eyes wide with panic. "What do we do?" His mind raced, cycling through 1,000 scenarios, 1,000 lies. "She's meeting someone else. It's a coincidence. She's dropping by to say hello before a charity dinner." But none of them fit the look in Sophia's eyes. This wasn't a coincidence. This was an ambush. "Just stay calm," he muttered, the words feeling like ash in his mouth. He was the master of crisis management, the man who could navigate a hostile takeover before breakfast. But in this moment, his formidable intellect felt like a rusted engine. He was exposed, pinned in the spotlight with his mistress and a silver key to a secret life sitting on the table between them. He watched paralyzed as Sophia finished her conversation with the hostess. She gave the girl a small, almost pitying smile, then turned her head. Her eyes swept across the dining room, a queen surveying her court. They passed over clusters of bankers, socialites, and politicians, and then with unerring, terrifying precision, they locked onto his. Time seemed to slow down. The distance between the entrance and his secluded booth stretched into an infinite, yawning chasm. He saw the flicker of recognition in her eyes, followed by nothing. No anger, no shock, no pain. Just a flat, empty acknowledgement. It was a look that said, "So, there you are." And then she started to walk. Her steps were slow, deliberate. Each footfall on the plush carpet was silent, yet it echoed in Oliver's mind like a hammer blow. She glided past a table of hedge fund managers who fell silent mid-sentence. She passed an elderly couple, the heirs to a steel fortune, who stared openly. The entire restaurant seemed to be holding its breath. They were all witnesses now. Kira had shrunk into the velvet of the banquette, trying to make herself invisible. She had her head down, her dark hair falling around her face like a curtain. The antique key was still on the table, gleaming under the candlelight, a damning piece of evidence. Oliver had a frantic, insane urge to swallow it. Sophia didn't stop until she was standing directly at the edge of their table. She loomed over them, her pregnant belly a silent, powerful third presence in their illicit world. For a long, torturous moment, she said nothing. She simply looked. Her gaze moved from Oliver's pale, sweat-slicked face to Kira's bowed head, and finally to the silver key on the table. A flicker of something, was it bitter amusement, crossed her lips. When she finally spoke, her voice wasn't a shout or a sob. It was worse. It was quiet, clear, and perfectly, unnervingly, composed. "Oliver," she said, as if she just bumped into him at the grocery store. "Fancy meeting you here." The silence that followed Sophia's words was a living thing. It pressed in on Oliver, stealing the air from his lungs. The background noise of the restaurant, the clinking of cutlery, the murmur of conversation, seemed to fade into a distant hum, like the sound of the ocean heard from inside a seashell. The entire universe had contracted to the 4-foot space of their table. Kira remained motionless, her head bowed as if in prayer or supplication. She hadn't looked up, hadn't made a sound. She was a statue of shame. Oliver, on the other hand, felt a surge of adrenaline-fueled defiance. His mind, finally rebooting from the initial shock, scrambled for a strategy. This was a negotiation, a hostile one. He needed to control the narrative. "Sophia," he began, his voice straining for a tone of surprised nonchalance. "What are you doing here? I thought you had your class tonight." He was already building the lie. "This is a business dinner. Kira is a consultant for our new arts foundation." The words were forming in his head, ready to be deployed. Sophia didn't even grant him the dignity of a direct response. Her eyes were fixed on Kira. "Please look at me," she said. Her voice was still quiet, but it carried an undeniable command. It was the same voice she used to silence a boardroom of argumentative executives. Slowly, hesitantly, Kira lifted her head. Her face was ashen, her storm cloud eyes filled with a terror that was almost painful to witness. She looked like a cornered animal. Sophia studied her for a moment, her expression unreadable. It wasn't the look of a scorned wife sizing up her rival. It was more like a scientist observing a specimen under a microscope. Clinical, detached. "What's your name?" Sophia asked. Kira's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She swallowed, her throat working. She glanced at Oliver, a desperate plea for help in her eyes. "Her name is Kira Petrova," Oliver cut in, his voice sharper than he intended. "She's the curator at the Gallerstein Gallery. We're discussing a potential sponsorship deal for the Prescott Foundation. It's a major philanthropic initiative." The lie sounded flimsy, even to his own ears. It was a paper shield against a battering ram. Sophia's gaze finally glacially shifted to him. A small, humorless smile touched her lips. "A sponsorship deal, I see. And does this sponsorship deal come with a key to a ghost apartment on 14th Street? The blood drained from Oliver's face. It wasn't a guess. It was a statement of fact. The precision of it hit him like a physical blow. Ghost apartment, the exact phrase he had used. He felt a dizzying sense of vertigo, as if the floor had dropped out from beneath him. She knew. She didn't just suspect. She knew. This wasn't an ambush. It was an execution. I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, the words hollow. The master of the universe was reduced to the pathetic denials of a schoolboy caught cheating on a test. Sophia ignored him again, turning her full attention back to the terrified woman opposite him. "Kira Petrova," Sophia said, her voice softening slightly, which was somehow more menacing. "Let me give you a piece of advice, from one woman to another. When a man like my husband offers you a key, he isn't offering you a home. He's offering you a cage. A slightly nicer cage than the one he keeps at home, perhaps. But a cage nonetheless." She reached out, her movements slow and deliberate, and picked up the silver key from the table. She held it between her thumb and forefinger, examining it in the candlelight. "This is a very specific design," she continued, her voice conversational. "It's from a locksmith in Prague who specializes in creating untraceable, custom-made security for discrete properties. My husband used the same locksmith for a penthouse in London 5 years ago, for a ballerina with the Royal Ballet, and for a chalet in Gstaad 3 years before that, for a French financier." She paused, letting the information land. She looked directly at Kira, whose face had crumpled into a mask of disbelief and dawning horror. "He tells you that you're different, doesn't he?" Sophia's voice was now laced with a chilling sort of pity. "That what you have is special, a rebellion, a real connection that he doesn't have in his cold, managed life. He told the ballerina that she was his art and the financier that she was his equal. What does he call you, I wonder? His chaos? His beauty of collapse?" The blood in Oliver's veins turned to ice. She knew the ballerina. She knew the financier. He thought those secrets were buried, locked away in impenetrable vaults of offshore accounts and non-disclosure agreements. But the most devastating blow was the last part. Beauty of collapse. The exact words Kira had used at the gallery. The very foundation of their connection. How could she possibly know that? Sophia had not come here to scream or cry or make a scene. She had come armed with information, with history, with his own patterns of betrayal. She wasn't just exposing an affair. She was deconstructing the very illusion he had sold to Kira and to himself. She was showing them both that this grand, passionate romance was nothing more than a tired, recycled script. Kira finally broke. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. She looked at Oliver, her expression a maelstrom of confusion, hurt, and accusation. The man who had promised her a unique, shared world was being unmasked as a serial predator with a playbook. "Oliver?" Kira's voice was a ragged whisper. Before he could answer, before he could formulate a new lie to paper over the gaping hole in his reality, Sophia placed the key back on the table with a soft, definitive click. Then she did something no one expected. She pulled over an empty chair from an adjacent, now vacant table, and with the slow, careful grace of a heavily pregnant woman, she sat down. She was not leaving. The tribunal had just been called to order. With Sophia seated, the dynamic at the table shifted irrevocably. She was no longer an intruder but a participant, a hostile board member initiating a takeover. The small, intimate booth suddenly felt claustrophobic, a witness box in a courtroom of her own design. Oliver felt a desperate need to regain control. His entire life was built on controlling outcomes, on anticipating moves 3 steps ahead. He had been outmaneuvered so completely that he felt like an amateur. "Sophia, this is not the time or the place," he said, his voice low and firm. He was trying to project authority, to remind her of the public setting, of the damage she was doing to the Prescott name. "We are in public. You are making a spectacle." Sophia turned to him, and for the first time, a flash of genuine cold fury lit her eyes. "A spectacle?" she repeated, her voice dangerously soft. "You are sitting in the most conspicuous restaurant in New York City with your mistress, while your wife is at home preparing for the birth of your son. You are the one who bought the tickets to this circus, Oliver. I'm just here to watch the show." She then turned her attention back to Kira, who was visibly trembling. "Tell me, Kira," Sophia said, her tone switching back to one of calm, forensic inquiry. "Did he tell you he loved you?" Kira flinched, looking at Oliver, as if for permission to speak. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of his head. "Don't answer, don't engage." Sophia saw the exchange. "Don't look at him, he can't help you. Look at me. Did he tell you he loved you?" Tears were now streaming freely down Kira's face. She nodded mutely, a tiny, pathetic gesture of surrender. "Of course he did," Sophia said with a sigh, as if discussing a predictable plot point in a boring novel. "And did he tell you my pregnancy was a complication? Something that happened, something that wasn't really planned, and that it changed things? But that his feelings for you were the only real thing in his life?" Kira's sharp intake of breath was all the confirmation Sophia needed. She had quoted his lies almost verbatim. The question that had been screaming in Oliver's mind finally burst out. "How? How do you know all this?" It was a raw, unguarded demand. Sophia finally gave him her full, undivided attention. The mask of calm fell away, and for a second, he saw the profound, bedrock, deep pain she had been concealing. But it was immediately replaced by an expression of diamond-hard resolve. "You are a creature of habit, Oliver," she said, her voice laced with a decade of accumulated knowledge of his every weakness. "You think you are a maverick, a gambler, but you are the most predictable man I have ever known. Your rebellions are all the same. You find a woman who represents something you think you lack: art, danger, intellectual freedom. You create a secret world. You use the same words, the same gestures, the same locksmiths." She gestured around the restaurant. "You even bring them to the same places. You brought the ballerina to this very booth. I found the receipt for a business dinner for 2 in your expense reports back then. I just chose to ignore it." Oliver felt a cold dread creep up his spine. She had known. For years. She had known and said nothing. His secret life hadn't been a secret at all. It had been a liability she had chosen to tolerate. "But why now, Sophia?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Why this? Why here?" "Because of him," she said, and she placed a hand on her swollen belly. The gesture was simple, but it was the most powerful move she had made all night. It was a checkmate. "Your affairs were a business expense I was willing to overlook for the sake of the partnership," she said, her voice dropping to an ice-cold whisper. The word partnership hung in the air, clinical and devoid of any affection. They were an indulgence, like your ridiculous collection of vintage cars, annoying but manageable. But you have become sloppy, reckless. You brought this dalliance to New York. You set up a permanent nest. You did it while I am carrying your son, the heir to the Prescott name, a name that I helped solidify, a company that my merger saved from a downturn 5 years ago. You did not just betray a wife, Oliver. You threatened a dynasty, and that is a mistake I will not tolerate. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't about a broken heart. This was about a broken contract. She wasn't reacting as a wife. She was reacting as the co-chair of an empire, and he had just jeopardized their primary asset, their reputation. "As for how I knew about tonight," she continued, a glint of something almost triumphant in her eye, And about your little catchphrases, you should really be more careful about who you try to poach. Oliver stared at her, uncomprehending. Your new executive assistant, she explained patiently. The one you hired away from Goldman Sachs last month? Andrew, a bright boy, very ambitious. He used to be my intern, years ago. His loyalty, it turns out, was to his first mentor, not his latest paycheck. He has been forwarding me your private calendar and transcribing your phone calls for the past 6 weeks. It's amazing what one can learn. For instance, the phrase beauty of collapse sounds a lot less poetic when you hear it for the fourth time, said to a fourth different woman. The world tilted on its axis. Andrew, his quiet, efficient, seemingly devoted assistant, was her spy. He had been betrayed from within his own inner sanctum. Every secret text, every whispered phone call, every clandestine meeting scheduled, she knew it all. She hadn't just stumbled upon his affair. She had a detailed, documented file on it. He looked at Kira, who was staring at Sophia with a strange mix of horror and awe. The woman she thought was a victim was, in fact, the architect of this entire catastrophic evening. She was the one holding all the cards. Oliver felt a surge of pure, unadulterated rage. He had been played. By his assistant. By his wife. He, Oliver Prescott, had been made a fool of. You, he started, his voice a low growl. You did all this to protect my son, Sophia finished for him, her voice unwavering, and to protect my investment. Now, she said, her tone shifting, becoming brisk and businesslike, I believe we have some terms to discuss. Sophia's declaration that there were terms to discuss hung in the air, turning the scene from a domestic drama into a corporate negotiation. Oliver was momentarily speechless, caught between fury at her manipulation and a grudging, terrifying respect for her strategic brilliance. But it was Kira who finally found her voice. The initial shock and hurt were beginning to curdle into a desperate, indignant anger. She had been publicly humiliated, emotionally dismantled, and exposed not as a cherished lover, but as the latest entry in a sordid ledger. You think this is just about you two? She interjected, her voice trembling but gaining strength. She pushed herself up straighter in the booth, her eyes red-rimmed from crying, flashing with defiance. She was no longer looking at Sophia with fear, but with a burgeoning resentment. You sit here, talking about dynasties and investments, as if I'm just a line item on a balance sheet. A dalliance. Is that what I am? She turned her fiery gaze on Oliver. You told me you were trapped. You told me she was cold, that your marriage was a business arrangement. You made me believe I was saving you. And you believed him, Sophia countered, her tone laced with a dry, almost weary condescension. My dear, the richest men in the world are never trapped. They build the cages. They just like to complain about the decor to women like you so you'll feel sorry for them. It's the oldest play in the book. And what book is that? Kira shot back. The one for society wives on how to weaponize your pregnancy and spy on your husband? You're no better than he is. This is sick. You're both sick. For the first time, a crack appeared in Sophia's icy composure. A flicker of raw emotion, annoyance, perhaps even offense, crossed her features. She had expected tears and a swift retreat from Kira, not a counterattack. Oliver saw an opening, a chance to sow chaos and disrupt Sophia's perfectly orchestrated plan. She has a point, Sophia. This is beneath you. Dragging her into it, laying out our entire history. It's vindictive. Vindictive? Sophia's laugh was a short, sharp, brittle sound. Oh, Oliver, we are long past vindictive. This is about damage control. She then did something that stunned them both into silence. She reached into her handbag, a classic, brutally expensive Hermes Birkin, and pulled out a slim manila folder. She slid it across the table, stopping it right in front of Kira. I believe this belongs to you, Sophia said. Kira stared at the folder as if it were a venomous snake. Hesitantly, she opened it. Inside was a multi-page document. At the top, in bold letters, it read, Prescott Foundation, Preliminary Art Acquisition and Curatorial Proposal. She flipped through the pages. It was a detailed, brilliantly researched proposal for the foundation to fund a new wing for emerging artists at a major city museum. It included potential acquisitions, budget forecasts, and a 5-year strategic plan. The proposed head curator for the project was listed on the final page, Kira Petrova. The salary package outlined was astronomical, enough to make her one of the most powerful figures in the city's art scene. Kira looked up, her face a canvas of confusion. What? What is this? That, Sophia explained, is a copy of the proposal my husband was going to offer you. Officially. He's been working on it for 2 months. It was his next move. Once he had you settled in the new apartment, once he felt you were securely his, this was going to be the Golden Leash, a prestigious, life-changing job, entirely funded and controlled by him. He would own your career, your home, your life. You wouldn't just be his mistress, you would be his employee. The color drained from Kira's face. She looked at the proposal, then at Oliver. The gift of the key, the talk of their future, it was all being recontextualized. It wasn't a romance. It was a hostile takeover of her life. That's not true, Oliver snarled. But the denial was weak. It was in fact exactly his plan. It was how he operated. He didn't just want Kira, he wanted to possess her world, to be her sole benefactor, ensuring she could never leave. Isn't it? Sophia continued relentlessly, turning back to Kira. Did you ever wonder why he was so interested in the financial struggles of your gallery? Why he asked so many specific questions about your long-term career ambitions? He wasn't making conversation, Kira. He was doing due diligence. He was researching his acquisition. Sophia leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping conspiratorially. Let me tell you something else he does. In about 6 months, he would have started to find fault with your work. Gentle criticisms at first, suggestions to acquire more market-friendly artists. He would slowly start to undermine your confidence, making you feel entirely dependent on his guidance, his approval. The chaos he loves so much would become too chaotic. He would start to crave order, his order, and you would have nowhere to go because your entire professional life would be in his hands. Every word was a perfectly aimed dart, puncturing the beautiful fantasy Kira had built around their affair. She was seeing the machinery behind the magic, the cold, calculating strategy behind the passionate romance. The man who had represented freedom was revealing himself to be the ultimate warden. Kira closed the folder with a snap. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes were dry now, filled with a new, hard light. The hurt was being cauterized by a white-hot rage. She had been played, not just by a cheating husband, but by a corporate predator. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. She looked down at Oliver, her face a mask of utter contempt. "You are pathetic," she said, her voice shaking with disgust. Then she turned to Sophia. "And you," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "You enjoy this, don't you? Tearing him down, tearing me down. You think you've won." "This isn't a game, my dear," Sophia replied calmly. "There are no winners here. There is only collateral damage, and I am simply ensuring it is contained." Kira let out a bitter, strangled laugh. She picked up the silver key from the table. For a second, Oliver thought she might throw it at him. Instead, she looked at it, then back at Sophia. "A cage," Kira whispered, finally understanding. She tossed the key back onto the table. It landed with a clatter that sounded as final as a gavel strike. Without another word, she turned and walked away. She didn't run. She walked with her head held high, a woman who had just had her heart and her ambition systematically dismantled in front of an audience, yet somehow managed to salvage a scrap of dignity. The entire restaurant watched her go, a silent, collective exhalation following in her wake. Now it was just the two of them, husband and wife, partners, enemies. The silence at the table was heavier, colder, and infinitely more dangerous than before. With Kira gone, a new, more profound silence settled over the table. The public part of the demolition was over. Now came the private arbitration. Oliver felt stripped bare. His lies, his methodologies, his entire persona as a master manipulator had been dissected and laid out on the table like a frog in a biology class. He stared at his wife. The woman he thought he knew, the woman he had underestimated for years, was a stranger to him. The serene, socially adept partner had been a facade, concealing a strategist as ruthless and calculating as he was. Was all that necessary? He finally asked, his voice low and gravelly. Humiliating her like that? Humiliating me? Do not mistake this for an emotional outburst, Oliver, Sophia said, her voice devoid of any warmth. She folded her hands over her pregnant belly. Every single word I have spoken tonight has been deliberate. The public setting, the presence of your mistress, the revelations, it was all necessary. I needed to establish a baseline of truth from which we can now negotiate. Negotiate? He laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. You mean dictate? What do you want, Sophia? A divorce? You want to take half? Go ahead. My lawyers will have a field day with your espionage tactics. It was a weak threat, and they both knew it. Any legal battle would unearth his serial infidelities, his misuse of corporate funds for his affairs. The board of Prescott Global, already wary of his cavalier style, would oust him. His father, the patriarch and founder, would disown him. A divorce would not just cost him half his fortune, it would cost him his empire. A divorce is messy, public, and bad for the stock price, Sophia said calmly, as if discussing a minor logistical issue. And more importantly, it would be detrimental to our son. He will not be the child of a scandalous, broken home. He will be a Prescott, and he will be raised in a stable, unified household. That is not negotiable. Oliver stared at her, bewildered. Then what are you saying? You want to stay married? After this? You want to pretend none of this happened? Oh no, she said, a chilling smile playing on her lips. I will never forget what happened, and neither will you. We will stay married, yes. We will present a united front to the world. We will raise our son together. But the terms of our partnership are going to be revised. She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto his. From this moment forward, I am no longer a silent partner in this marriage or in this company. I am taking an active role. I want the seat on the board that you have been promising your father you would give me for the last 5 years. The one you've been holding back because you don't want me interfering in your business. Oliver's jaw tightened. That board seat was more than symbolic. It held real power, a vote on every major decision the company made. Furthermore, she continued, her voice as sharp as glass, I will have full, unrestricted access to all corporate accounts, expense reports, and travel logs. No more shadow accounts. No more discretionary funds. You will have a corporate credit card with a limit, just like any other senior executive. A limit that I set. This was an emasculation. He was the CEO, the Titan. She was proposing to put him on an allowance. And finally, she said, delivering the killing blow, your father, he is stepping down as chairman at the end of the year. He was going to name you his successor. Now he will be naming me. The air left Oliver's lungs in a rush. Chairman of the board. It was the culmination of his life's work, the final ascension to the throne. His father had all but promised it to him. You're insane, he breathed, shaking his head. He would never choose you over me. Wouldn't he? Sophia challenged, her confidence absolute. Your father is a pragmatist. He cares about one thing above all else, the legacy of the Prescott name. I will present him with a choice. Option A, his son, a reckless, serially unfaithful CEO whose impending, explosive scandal could tank the company and tarnish the family name for a generation. Or option B, his daughter-in-law, the mother of his only grandson, a steady hand who not only saved the company with her merger, but has now proven she has the strategic foresight and moral fortitude to protect it from its greatest liability. You. She paused, letting the brutal logic sink in. Who do you think he will choose, Oliver? The reckless son or the protector of his legacy? He had no answer. He knew his father. He knew the old man's ruthless pragmatism. Sophia was right. Presented with that choice, his father would cut him loose without a second thought. Suddenly, a movement at the edge of his vision caught his eye. A woman at a table across the room, dining alone, was discreetly tapping on her phone, her screen angled toward them. He recognized her instantly. Brenda Finch, the most venomous, well-connected gossip columnist in the city. Her blog, Finch's Perch, could make or break careers overnight. Brenda met his eyes for a split second, and a sly, predatory smile crossed her face. She knew. She had seen it all. Kira's tearful departure, Sophia's commanding presence, the entire drama. Sophia followed his gaze and saw the columnist. She didn't flinch. It seems our time is up, she said calmly. Brenda will have that story online within the hour, which means my call to your father needs to happen before he reads it from her. I suggest you agree to my terms, Oliver, because in about 10 minutes, your negotiating power is going to fall off a cliff. She stood up slowly, her regal composure fully restored. She looked down at him, a man who, just an hour ago, had been the king of his own universe and was now a cornered, defeated subordinate. I will expect your lawyers to have the paperwork for the board seat and the chairmanship transfer drawn up by morning, she said. Don't be late for your prenatal appointment tomorrow. We're picking out cribs. She turned and walked away, leaving him alone at the table with the antique key, the damning folder, and the bill. He watched her go, not as his wife, but as his new boss, his conqueror. The cage he had so desperately wanted to escape had just become his entire world, and Sophia had just locked the door from the inside. The walk out of Ethelred's was the longest of Oliver Prescott's life. The whispers followed him like a physical tide. The stares of the other patrons felt like blows. Brenda Finch's predatory smile was burned into his memory. He knew that by the time his car door closed, the story would already be spreading through the digital ether, a wildfire of scandal he had no power to stop. He arrived at their palatial Fifth Avenue penthouse to find it silent and dark, save for a single light glowing from the study. It was Sophia's study, a room he rarely entered, filled with books on corporate law and economic theory. He followed the light and found her sitting not at her desk, but in an armchair by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over the glittering expanse of Central Park. She still had her coat on. She didn't turn as he entered. My call with your father is done, she said to the glass. Oliver's heart hammered against his ribs. And? He was disappointed, she said, the word carrying a universe of meaning. Disappointment from William Prescott was a death sentence. He was, however, impressed with my proactive approach to crisis management. He agrees that a change in leadership is necessary to project stability. It was done, just like that. His birthright, the chairmanship he had worked toward his entire life, was gone, handed over in a 5-minute phone call. So that's it? He said, his voice raw with disbelief. You just take everything? Sophia finally turned to look at him. The hard, strategic mask was gone. In the soft light of the lamp, he saw the deep, soul-crushing exhaustion on her face. He saw the faint puffiness around her eyes that spoke of tears shed in private, long before tonight's confrontation. For the first time, he was seeing the woman, not the warrior. You think this is what I wanted? She asked, her voice cracking for the first time. You think I enjoyed any of this? Orchestrating this nightmare? Humiliating another woman? Blackmailing my own husband? I have spent the last 6 weeks living with this poison inside me, ever since Andrew first showed me your calendar. Every loving touch, every shared smile we've had has been a lie. I've had to sit at dinners with you, plan our son's future with you, all while knowing you were building a separate life with someone else. She stood up and walked towards him, her hand instinctively going to her belly. I did this because you left me no choice, Oliver. You risked everything. Our family, our company, our son's future. You were like a gambling addict, raising the stakes again and again, convinced you would never lose. I didn't take anything from you. I simply collected on the debt when you finally went bust. He had nothing to say. There were no more lies, no more defenses. She was right. He had been reckless, arrogant, convinced of his own invincibility. He had viewed his life, his marriage, as a game he could not lose. What happens to us now? He whispered, the question feeling pathetic and small. Now, she said, her voice regaining its strength. We perform. We will be the perfect couple. We will attend the galas. We will smile for the cameras, and we will raise a brilliant, beloved son. You will be the handsome, supportive husband to the powerful new chairwoman of Prescott Global. And in private, in this home, we will be two people bound by a contract and a child. You will have your wing of the penthouse, and I will have mine. There will be no more shared life, Oliver. Only a shared legacy. It was a sentence of life imprisonment in the gilded cage he had once complained about. But now the door was locked and the key was in her possession. His phone buzzed. It was a notification from the New York Post. The headline was stark: Prescott implodes. Billionaire heir caught with mistress by pregnant wife in Ethelred's showdown. Beneath it was a blurry photo, clearly taken by Brenda Finch. It showed the three of them at the table, a tableau of betrayal. The wildfire was burning. He looked up from the screen at Sophia. She was already walking away, heading towards her side of the apartment, leaving him standing alone in the dark. He was Oliver Prescott, a billionaire, a titan of industry, a man who had everything. And in the space of a single dinner, he had lost it all, even as he kept it all. He was a king in his own kingdom and a prisoner in his own home. The collapse he had found so beautiful in a painting had finally come for him, and there was no beauty in the ruins. Only the cold, silent truth of what he had destroyed. And so, Oliver Prescott's world didn't end with a bang, but with the quiet closing of a door in his own home. He's left with his fortune and his name, but at what cost? He's now a passenger in the life he once commanded, forever living in the shadow of his wife's strength and his own spectacular failure. This story is a chilling reminder that sometimes the most dramatic falls aren't from the top of a skyscraper, but from the grace of the person sleeping in the room next door. It shows that secrets are debts that always come due, and the interest can cost you everything you hold dear. What do you think? Was Sophia a brilliant strategist who did what was necessary, or a cold-hearted woman as manipulative as her husband? And what about Kira? Was she a victim or a willing participant who got burned? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story captivated you, please hit that like button, share it with someone who loves a good drama, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel for more stories that uncover the secrets hiding just beneath the surface of a perfect life.